This is Chapter 8 review. So I want you, again, like I did for Chapter 7, get the problems written down that I do for you to help you review in this process. This is over the sections 8.1 and 8.2. This entire chapter is on quadrilaterals. So as we look at problem number 1, there are certain things that we learned about four-sided figures.
It's upside down.
Certain things we learned about quadrilaterals. These are all angles that we call interior angles. They add, if you add them all up, they add to some number. Does anybody remember what all the angles of a four-sided figure would add to? 360 degrees. Okay? So that's the information. If I add up all of these, I get 360 degrees. Destiny said that very, very intelligently. She remembers, so we're trying to review. How do I know how much is left if all these three add up to something? How do I determine what's left for the x? Add them all up and subtract from 360. So I would take 360 and I would subtract away what those other angles add up to. That would tell us what x is. And if you do that arithmetic of adding and subtracting, you get the x is 79 degrees. Can you remember that all four angles of any quadrilateral add to 360? And a hush. That's the lesson. What I just said, if you had missed it, what could you do tonight if I YouTube this? And hear it again. And as the video is playing, I want to make sure that you understand one of the reasons we understand that you're not going to hear everything that's being presented to you is very important, valuable information. Because we understand that, we even do that as adults. We go to workshops and we don't hear everything. I mean, we're talking to our neighbor about other things. When something is being shared to you that would be hugely beneficial to you, we do that at our works. That's a human thing. Okay? So sometimes in classes we have to separate people, like in second grade, but those are things that have to happen. We try to improve how much you hear. If you don't hear everything, with the video to be able to access, you could get that, and Lane would be able to capture that because he wasn't focusing on it at that particular time. Right? Isn't that a good thing? Yeah. Okay. So, problem, that's that section. Any questions about that particular lesson that we learned about quadrilaterals? Yes?
Can't you also proportional by?
It's not a proportion. Nowhere do we see any. That was last chapter. I'm glad you're remembering those lessons from last chapter, but that's not what we're doing here. Okay? Good question.
Can you help with number 3?
Great question. Number 3 is not talking about interior questions. I'm not going to interior angles. I'm not going to do it, but I'll share this so you can write it down. Regardless of Lane sitting down or not, regardless of the shape of the polygon, it doesn't matter whether you have 4 sides, 3 sides, a billion sides. If you add up all the exterior angles, in problem number 3, those are not interior angles. They are outside the shape. They're exterior. When you add them, you will always get 360 degrees. So Lane's finally getting something to write with to capture these important things. Got it? All exterior angles. So problem number 3, they all add up to what? 360. That would also be true if it were a 100-sided shape. In the problem number 4, we learned some things about parallelograms. What did we learn about parallelograms in Chapter 8? For speed's sake, I won't wait for you to not respond. Opposite sides are the same length. Opposite sides are also parallel to each other, if it's a parallelogram. What about opposite angles? What did you learn quickly? They're the same measure, congruent. What did you learn about diagonals? of parallelograms? They bisect each other, okay? So those are things you should capture in your notes as you're reviewing this, written on the side of your test so that you can remember them. Or you can look at this video if we do get it saved. How much time have we got?
Been on for 6.
Problem number 4 asks you to solve for x. So knowing some of these properties, how could you look at number 4 and then do something to solve for what value the x letter has? What equals?
Set them up
What do you know that 3x plus 2 has to equal?
23.
3x plus 2 has to equal 23 because opposite sides are the same length. They have to be the same. So doing this, I'm not going to take the time to teach the algebra. I'll just demonstrate it for you. And dividing by 3, you get 7. So that's the value for x. That's showing your work. You put the answer in the answer column. You do the same thing for y in that problem that says that that opposite side of 2y minus 7 has got to be the same as 9. Solving for y, you get the value for y to be 8. That's the answer for number 4. You capture that on your test. You've shown your work. You write the answer on the right-hand side lane.
Oh, just wondering, this is off topic, but what happened to that power limit?
Good question. Ask it at a more appropriate time. Turn the page. This next page, we talk about section 8.3 and 8.4 in your book. As a sense of review, let's talk about it. This is a quadrilateral, and they say, for what value does x have to be for that to be a parallelogram? Well, those are diagonals, right? In problem number 1? What do you know about diagonals of? They bisect. So what do you know that 5x minus 3 has to equal if that's a parallelogram? So you set that equal to each other and then simply solve. Again, I'm not taking the time for the Algebra 1 lesson of solving the equation, but the geometry teaches you how to write it. Okay? So again, I went through that real quick. So that's that section. Use the properties that you're learning about parallelograms to write an equation and solve for a variable. Could you do that again? Could you practice those problems? The next section is asking you to classify. That means, what would you call it? Look at number 4. What name would you call that shape? Fred? Bob? Is that the name?
No.
Well, other names that we talked about are squares, rhombuses. This is what they're asking you to do. Parallelogram. It might be a kite. Maybe. Maybe not. It might be a rectangle. These are all 4-sided figures. Okay? So these are names that they're asking you to classify. Number 4, if I did that for you, the diagonals are exactly the same length. What's the length of each diagonal in number 4? The diagonal.
Oh, 6.
They're the same. And the angles, they perpendicularly bisect each other. So that is a square. So in the work that you show, you don't just write square on the right-hand side, you explain why. Okay? You can use those explanations. Okay? Turn the page. Last page. Goes over sections 5 and 6 in chapter 8. And for this review, you look at these problems, and now we're talking about, gee, what kind of shapes is that number 1? What is that?
It's a trapezoid.
It is a trapezoid. But they also give you a little bit more information to give it a more definite name. It's not just a trap. It's not just a trapezoid. Those things we studied in the past. It's isosceles because they told you the 2 sides are the same. Sides that are not parallel. So we call that an isotrap. And so we learned some things about an isosceles trap. If this was 80, we called this a base angle in our crossword puzzle that we did, right? That's 80. What's the other base angle?
80.
Gotta be the same. What did we learn about, what do these add up to? These 2 angles that I'm pointing at now. Then you add to 180. So if this is 80, what does that leave for this up here? And if that's 100, then what does this have to be? Gotta be the same. So that's what they ask you to do. Again, that's pretty simple, right? It's pretty fast. So those are some properties that we've learned, and so you continue that process through 1, 2, and 3. 4 and 5 really is a continuation of that. They just want you to name the quad. Can you tell what kind of quad number 4 is? It's more than just a trapezoid. It's a isosceles trapezoid. Why? 70 is 70, right? That means the opposite sides of the same. What would 5 be? What does that look like?
Kite.
You all, most of you, Bill. Okay, get the idea? So this set of 3 pages of quiz probably won't take you too long. This has been the Chapter 8 review of the 3 quizzes. You will choose 2 lessons from these to create your video, and when is it due?
Thursday.
I appreciate the audience here at the Ask Academy and the audience on the YouTube world. Thank you for listening.